not sure if you can't attend. We recently had the China National Coordination Group established last week, and they can't attend at this time. So I'll make this available at the end there's a KBA YouTube website. If you look for KBA community under YouTube, you'll come across all the KBA related videos. I want to thank Olivia Crow, who works for BirdLife International. She's been leading the charge of developing the new KBA database, and particularly this new proposal portal. Ultimately, I know most of you have been used to using the Excel forms, but we'll be wanting people to migrate over to using this proposal portal, where certainly for single site proposals. And Olivia is going to walk us through it in this webinar to show how you would make a proposal, how you can engage other people in your proposal, and how you then go through the review process until it's finally confirmed as a KBA. So I'd like to welcome Olivia, and I'll hand it over to you. And she's also going to show us some of the dashboard that was recently developed as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us today. Yes, my name's Olivia. I work with the science team. I'm the Global Science Coordinator for IBAs and KBAs. So I've worked with some of you in the recent past. Hopefully into the future can be available to support you guys in using these systems. As Andy says, firstly, what I'm going to do is split the presentation into two. First bit, I won't spend a huge amount of time on it, is the KBA dashboard. And then I'll move on to the World Database of KBAs. So first of all, on the KBA dashboard, so you can access this by the KBA website. Jump into the system.
As you can see there. So sometimes when we go on our communities, because this will help our police document that. A
bit of this. Can you guys mute yourselves, please? Thanks very much. So you access it through the main KBA website, and it's in the Explore Data section. When you jump on the Explore Data section right from the outset, you're met with this page here. I like to open it in a new window because you can get the full effects of everything that the dashboard has to offer. It was built in Power BI by our information management team here in BirdLife. Largely Sarah Mogg and Mike Evans is following up in terms of the maintenance of it. So I'll just start by getting rid of the filters just to show you what the main dashboard shows. There are 5 main tabs. The first one is information about the site overall, where it is, the number of KBAs and so on. And then there are further details based on the table down here. You'll see the standard banner that occurs in all of the tabs, and it lets you know where you're at and whether things are filtered. Second tab is a map. It takes a little bit of time to load up, but once it loads up, then you'll see all of the KBAs distributed throughout the world. And it makes more sense, I suppose, as you filter down into it. Habitats, this is information that we hold in the system relating to any of the habitats using the IUCN habitat classification scheme. And again, there's a table relating with all the information related to it. Information relating to threats, and of course, most importantly, information relating to biodiversity that occur in the sites. And this graph here to the left relates to the one on the right, and it shows the criteria that are met overall, and it relates to what species group that the criteria belong to. So you can see that we have D2 and D3, not a huge number of KBAs related to them, but they are solely related to fish. Whereas there's a good mix of groups in most of the other criteria. So just jumping over to the filter menu. Here you can use the filters to filter whereabouts in the world you're interested in. country is related to region. So if you select a particular region, then you'll get whatever countries you're interested in relation to whatever region you've selected. System from marine through to terrestrial. Can select by protected area coverage, habitat type, by threat type, and you can zone down to any particular threats that you might be interested in. We have threat impact, and we have site pressure overall. You can filter by taxonomy, so you can zoom into a particular taxonomic group, taxonomic level, or you can zoom right down to species if you wish. We have a species group category here, which is 10 or so very broad groupings. You can select any one of those. You can select by red list category. And then finally, you can select by KBA status. All of them are confirmed at the moment, or we just have the confirmed sites in this dashboard at the moment, and KBA criteria. So you can select by any particular criteria. So just by way of example here, if I select Central Asia, and you can see here on the menu on the right, it automatically hones in on the particular filter type. And I'm going to hone in on Turkmenistan, and there's 50 KBAs and so on, and you can get information about that. So if I just select all here, so we have more information. So if I look at Central Asia, and you can see all of the information in these tabs is related to whatever your filter type is. Etc. See these are the sites here. These are threats that have been identified in those sites, and so on. And to clear the filters, you can use this clear tab here. It's a handy way of getting back to where you were at the beginning. And then just to say that all of this is interactive. So for example, if I wanted to know about sites that were like very high pressure impacts of residential and commercial development, if I select this, then you immediately see zoom down to the relevant sites that this is related to. And in any of these tabs, you'll get information specific to that sort of. Well, actually, it's not interactive between the tabs, but it isn't interactive within each of the tabs. So if I go back to the biodiversity, if I go to the biodiversity one, for example, and I select plants, this is the information relating to plants. So we have 1,700 or so KBAs that have been identified for them. This is protected area coverage and so on, and this is the table relating to them. So that, I think, is as much as I needed to say about the dashboard itself. And I'll take some questions, any questions that you might have at this point, before I move on to the KBA database. I can't see hands, Andy, so I'll leave that to you. If there's any queries.
There's one from Chiara.
Trying to turn my stuff on. I have a question with the KBA status, because that's something that I've heard people discussing quite a bit recently. And there is a need really clear on what the KBA status is. Is there any chance to expand that into, like, you know, confirmed and updated, assumed pretty good, you know, like, so all the types are in there, but those are not reassessed yet. So is there, what are the plans for developing a little bit more information about that?
I'm not quite sure if I got the full of it. There was a bit of an echo there, Chiara.
Yeah, on my side
I think I got the gist of it. Yes, we are planning a little bit more development in this area here, where we want to try and add some more information that allows you to zoom into sites that are identified by global KBA criteria as discrete from sites that have been identified from through the legacy criteria. That will allow you to hone in on specifics. Is that what you were getting at?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Cool.
Simi has his hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you. That was my question as well. I think the website really looks good and it's easy to navigate. But I also wanted to find out if it's possible to identify legacy KBAs from your filter. Because I mean, most countries, especially in Africa, when they start identifying or assessing their KBAs, they want to start from the legacy KBAs and trying to see if the global standard applies to the KBAs.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that. That's one of the key priorities that we have to sort that out. We're quite busy with the database itself at the moment, but that is certainly one of the priority things on our list to get sorted out.
Okay, I can't see any more questions. So
Okay.
I think let's move on to the proposal portal. Then people can come back and ask questions at the end if they have any others.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Andy. Okay, so moving on, moving on to the portal itself. So just a little bit of background about the portal. So our intention here has been to generate a database for the storage and management of all KBA data. It'll allow you as a user to register and log in to access information relating to KBAs, to collaborate with others within the system, to propose new sites as KBAs, to reassess already existing sites, and to update information on biodiversity, to update the information in relation to current sites. So the system itself has been developed to apply a bunch of data validation rules, tells you whether your site meets the criteria and what criteria it meets. And it supports the whole review and confirmation process. It was developed with generous support of the Garfield Weston Foundation and from the Bezos Earth Fund. It's been completed with a lot of early thoughts and efforts of BirdLife in relation to trying to get it off the ground. The information management team was very involved in sort of putting a lot of thinking behind it. And laterally and more recently, since about September last year, we've been working with an external company in Dava who have developed the system to date. There's been quite a lot of inputs from the WDKBA advisory group, who include members of all of the KBA, or most of the KBA partners, should I say, and they've been instrumental in helping us get it off the ground also. We had a soft launch of the system in mid-June. Soft launch because while we have it off the ground, there are still plenty of things in development. So we'd ask you to please bear with us in these early days, and please continue, as many of you have been to date, in providing us with any feedback. We're coming across glitches. Some of them are more serious than others. I think that's got to be expected for something as complex as this. But we're trying to address any of the serious ones in particular as a matter of priority to make sure that the system is working. So yeah, it is working, and please do continue to provide your feedback as you get on and start investigating it yourselves. So the system itself is accessible through the KBA website. You'll see this big green button here over to the right. If you click on log in, this is your typical landing page. So if you're not registered, then you'll have to register in the system, otherwise you log in. So I'll just click on register and just pick out a few things that have been catching a couple of folks. Just where some further explanation just might help. Your registration is like a typical registration page for many on many sites. A couple of the specifics here. You have two options: you're an individual or you're an NCG. If you register as an NCG, your registration will be pending when you get into the site, and the KBA Secretariat at the moment, into the future, will hopefully enable it for the RFPs, that you'll be able to, they will assign you NCG status. But generally speaking, most of the registrations to date have been individual. In terms of country of interest, you can your countries of interest, you can select all, or you can select any particular country. So you can scroll down and select. Something that's been catching a few folks is this apply and cancel menu here. So once you select a country that you're interested in, make sure you select the apply button. If I select a couple of countries here and I go off this, it still indicates that I've selected those countries, but because I haven't actually clicked apply, I won't actually be able to register. So don't let that one catch you out. And the same thing is in relation to KBA partner. You can select more than one option, and once again, don't forget to click the apply button. You can view the terms and use of the site, click I agree, and you can create your account. And then once you have registered, then you can sign in and click Remember Me to help you get back onto the site more quicker into the future. So once you sign in then, I'll just give you a flavor of how this site is set up, and then I'll go through and sort of talk a little bit more detail about how to go about proposing a site and so on, or proposing an assessment. So this is the landing screen at the moment. You'll land in on the sites page, and this is all, at the moment we have 16,642 sites identified. These are confirmed, superseded or delisted KBAs. So the whole, all sites are in the mix. You have filter menus here for country, year and status. Down the bottom we have pagination, and you'll see if I change that from 12 to 24, it doesn't look much different here, but the difference is that I have a scroll bar and I can scroll through sites on the right. And obviously then it affects the number of pages that I have down the bottom right here. On the left-hand menu, we'll be developing this a little bit more into the future. We'll have spatial integration, so we'll have map facility, hopefully in the not too distant future. We'll also have some monitoring, don't have anything in monitoring at the moment. And also hoping to put something on the home page, which is a little bit of information that just to help people get started. We just haven't had a chance to get that sort of what might seem like fairly basic stuff up on the site just yet. So as I said, there's 16,000 sites at the moment. The My Site section is an area that's your part of the site. So if you're an RFP, you'll be able to see any site in that section that you're associated with, so any site in your region that needs attention. If you're an NCG, you'll be able to see all sites in your country. And if you're a proposer, you'll be able to see any site that you've interacted with. And as KBA Secretariat, you can see everybody. This over here to the top right, you have your profile. You can amend any of the details. If you're interested in another country, you can add another country to your list, so on. So you can amend your details there. You can view the terms and use and the privacy policy if you want to. And this bell here is a notification section. So when there's interaction within the site, either between proposers or between the RFP, KBA Secretariat and the proposer, you'll see a number up beside this bell here, and you'll know that there's a notification there. So just the other thing to point out here is that by default it's collapsed, but the menu here on the right, you can click on this and it gives you the full menu. So home, sites and monitoring. In due course, we will have reporting. We're currently developing that at the moment, and imports. So there'll be a section for those of you that are looking to identify and propose assessments for large numbers of sites at the one time. And we'll also have some supporting material also. So when it comes to going to the next step to either proposing a new site or undertaking a reassessment, so proposing a new site is the button up here to the top. If you wish to view or undertake a reassessment of an already existing site, these dots here on the right hand side have two options. One is to view site, and the other one is to assess biodiversity. If you click assess biodiversity, that will automatically start a reassessment. And if you click view site, you'll be able to see the site and the site details in view only mode. So I'm going to click on view site to start with, and just flicking through the site here. We have, so once you're in the site assessment frame, you have these tabs up across the top. which tells you where you are in the system. So we have about, site details, assessment, threats and actions, and KBA criteria. So in the about proposal, this is information about what criteria have been assessed. Unfortunately, I haven't picked a great site here. It's probably a legacy site that hasn't got a huge amount of information associated with it. Actually, let me get back out of here and let me go to something like Mozambique, which did an assessment quite recently. And let me pick this one here. So you can see here, there's a little bit more detail than the site that I selected. So there's information about the criteria that the NCG assessed. So criteria for A1, B1, information about the consultation and stakeholders. In site details, we have information, all information in relation to the site description, usual about lat longs, depth, etc. Rationale for identification, and so on. In assessment, these are all of the species that have been assessed. There are 2 pages of it here. And you can go into any one of those species and you can view the information that, and I'll take you through this now shortly. Threats and actions, information about ongoing conservation actions at the site. You can see here, conservation actions needed, threats, and these are all using the IUCN classifications. Quite a lot of threats have been identified. And the KBA criteria tab tells you about all the species that are in your assessment, includes information, some summary information about reproductive units, percentage in site, and the KBA criteria that were met for each one of those triggers. We don't have any ecosystems in the databases yet, but once ecosystems are being assessed, you'll be able to see the ecosystem criteria met, and also information about criterion C and criterion E. And those, I'll go through those assessments now shortly. So that is the basic framework of system. And just before I go on to talk about how to go about carrying out an assessment, just to point out that in the system we have optional and mandatory fields. If the fields are mandatory, they won't have an optional. So any of the fields that are optional will have optional against them. So if you go through the process and you fill out all of the details and you click propose assessment, if there are any, if there's any information missing from fields that are mandatory, then you won't actually be able to click propose it, and it'll tell you that you need to go back and check, and I'll go through that shortly. And then just before I move off this page here, there's a section here for reviewers, and well, actually, I'll see it in that mode. I'll show you in the. I'll show you in the once we're in the assessment mode. I'll show you about the co-proposers, but they're yeah. So actually, before, so I'm actually, given that this is the main database, I'm actually going to go. We have another database, and it's called the UAT. And it's the training version of the database, and it's quite useful because it allows it'll allow folks to go in, try it out, and see how it works. We haven't made it, we haven't disseminated the address of it yet, because I'm a bit concerned about people jumping on it and testing and then forgetting they're on the being on the wrong version and potentially proposing an assessment in the trial version and going to all that effort. But yeah, we will put that out in due course, and we'll make sure it's clearly branded as well. So we'll do that shortly. I'm going to just jump on that system now. It's exactly the same. You will have to register all over again on it, but it's exactly the same system. So in terms of, so that's what I wanted to show you was, so how to undertake an assessment or a reassessment. So to undertake a new assessment of the site, you click the blue button up here, and you're immediately taken into this top menu across the top here, and you can start providing details about your assessment, consultation process and stakeholders, any reviewers who might be you think might be able to review your work. You can provide all your site details. You can see that an automatic ID has been assigned to the new site. You can begin by entering your site name and so on, and you can work through the site details. The assessment information. We have 4 main sections. There's the species, ecosystems, ecological integrity, and irreplaceability. So the species is by far the more complex because there's a lot more fields associated with it. And when to identify a new species, you use this menu here, and you can type in species name, and you can add the species. And once you add the species, then you get this pop-up. This first set of fields that you will see, these are fields that come from, we have this SIS backbone from the IUCN that feeds all of the system. So the first port of call is to try and find your species in that list. If you have a species and it doesn't occur in the IUCN red list or in the SIS backbone, then you need to contact the KBA Secretariat, and they'll support the process of making contact with the IUCN to try and get the species listed. Most of the species to date are within the system, and you'll find any details relating to its red list category and so on, whether it's range restricted, if it's ecoregion or bioregion restricted and so on, will all be listed here. And this section is not editable. The main assessment sections are further down, where you have to provide a season and an assessment parameter. And the reason the season is here is because there are some species for which the range differs between the breeding and the non-breeding season and so on. So you select your season and your assessment parameter, and then you scroll down and you provide, so we'll go for mature individuals, and if there is an IUCN a global estimate for the species, then it will pop up with the general reference for the species. If you have a more recent reference, in some cases we acknowledge that the IUCN estimate might not be the most appropriate, might be out of date, or there might be something more appropriate. You may change this value if you need to, and you will be obliged to always change the source. And the RFP will obviously have to pick up on that in due course, and make sure they're happy with it. But generally speaking, as I say, if there's an estimate, it will be provided. Down here, then you provide information about the site estimates. You can see here we have options for min, best, and max. Min and max are optional, often quite useful, but the main estimate that we need in the system is the best estimate. The year of the estimates here, min and max, acknowledging that for some it may not be so relevant for things like the spatial metrics. That's probably going to be the current year. This might be something that we can look at into the future, making it only mandatory for where mature individuals is used. You provide source, the deviation of your estimates. So how did you get to drive your estimate in the first place? This is a field that we'll be removing. Evidence of presence. We need evidence of presence to make sure that you need to provide some narrative there to show where the species, or what evidence you have to state that the species is present. The year of that evidence, minimum number of reproductive units, and how you've defined your reproductive units, and the source of reproductive units. Down here we have 7 or 8 different conditions that you need to supply. So if it's a site regularly supporting the species, so for A1 and B1, we need to know that. If the site is regularly occurring and is range restricted in that season, then it's B2 and so on. So this one's for ecoregion and bioregion restricted. This is for globally most important 5% and for aggregatory species and so on. And once again, don't forget to click the apply menu once you have provided that detail. You also should provide some justification for your selection here. So if it's an aggregatory species, please provide information about why it's an aggregation, or what evidence you have to say that's an aggregation or aggregatory species, and the source of that information. And then any other details that you want to provide, you can provide there. You can also provide with a second assessment parameter if you wish, or in some cases you might be providing a breeding season estimate and a non-breeding season estimate. So you can provide all information for that species within that window. And once you finish, then you click Finish Editing. The second section is for ecosystems. Unlike the species, it's not a pop-up window. You can type in all the information relating to the ecosystem within the frame that you see. And if you want to add a new one, then you can do so. So if I just add one, you can see that I automatically then get an option for a second ecosystem if that applied for a particular site. So within the ecosystem, then you provide information about the red list category, the global extent. The best estimate is the mandatory one. Here we have minimum and maximum. We haven't made those optional yet, but they will be optional. So it'll just be a best estimate for the site. You have your global estimate, the year of the information, and the source. So they're the fields that are required for that. Ecological integrity and irreplaceability, both of those criteria are very much based on analyses and background information and a lot of back and forth, I think, certainly in these earlier stages with the RFPs and with the KBA Secretariat. So we've really only got a basic set of fields here that we need for those purely to get them into the system, and so that we can have the KBA criteria tab actually working for them. So we can then identify whether a site meets criterion C or criterion A if they have been selected here, and they will have had to go through the approval process before the site can be confirmed. So the RFP and KBA Secretariat will have to sign off on them. So they are the main assessment sections of the site. And then threats and actions are information where you provide anything relating to, let's start with the actions, ongoing, let's select yes. And we have, against the ISIN classifications here, and you can scroll down, you can select whatever applies, and select a few and click apply. And so we select the ones that are ongoing and conservation actions needed. And for threats, then you can select again from the ICN selector level 1. It automatically gives you your level 2, and in some cases there will be level 3s. And then once you've identified what threat you're talking about, then it's a matter of indicating what the timing of it is, and you can identify a new one and so on. So that is the basic identification, or how you go about identifying or putting information in relation to an assessment at a new site. I just go back to the sites here, and I mentioned earlier that we have a My Sites section, which is, these are the sites that are solely associated with me. So it'll be handy to go back to over time as you build up your site list. This will build up over time. Before I go on to the next bit, what I'll just show you is if you're associated with a particular site, and you know that there is another group of folks working on perhaps another taxonomic group, another species group, and they are also doing an assessment, and the country doesn't have an NCG, you can invite that person to participate in the assessment through the co-proposers option here. So if you click invite, that then allows you to type in some credentials of somebody else that might be in the system. So I'm going to take a stab at Jill's in there. So I'm going to invite Jill to participate in this assessment. I send an invite to her. When she logs in the next time, she will see in her sites, she will see that site, and she will have the ability to participate in that assessment. So that's quite a useful one to have. So back to sites. I've got two that I wanted to show you here. One is a draft that's almost ready for proposal. So I have filled in some details related to the assessment. I've given a species and I've provided some site details. And I'm going to click propose assessment. And it's telling me that I haven't completed enough details. So this is part of the validation process in the system. So it's saying that I'm missing information in about, site details, and assessment. So I'm going to continue editing. And if I go back to site details, I can see here that I'm missing the country that the site is in. So I'm going to scroll down to the Falklands. And you can see it appears here. Once again, don't forget to click apply. I'm missing information about elevation, etc. I'm not going to go through this now, but I just wanted to show you that this actually, so here in the actual assessment, I'm missing information from 7 fields. So if I click on assess here and I scroll down, you can see it's all within these systems here. So the global is fine. Scroll down to the site so you can see I'm missing details here. So once you complete all your missing details, then you will be able to propose the assessment. That's fine, so that's fine. And about I'm missing information about stakeholders. So that is that. And then this one here, I've taken that to proposed state. So I'm just going to jump off the individual, and I'm just going to jump onto the RFP role to show you how it looks and how I, as an RFP, will feed back to the proposer. So this is a dummy RFP role for Europe, and when I'm signed in now, I can see all sites, all European sites, and I want to zone in on the assessment that has been the assessments that have been proposed, because they're the ones that I need to attend to. So if I use the menu here to select proposed, I can see my assessment and I can review that assessment. So I can go through and I can see there's information, and I can see that the site details aren't very complete. I can see there's lots of missing information, not very much detail at all. So I can select here and I can provide some feedback to the proposer where they need to provide some more detail. So the first thing I need to do is select a category. So I'm going to talk about delineation here. And I'm going to say it'll be more comprehensive than that in real life, but just for illustration. And generally speaking, I can go through and I can review the assessment information. So there's the species. You can see that the information is there, site information. However it's done, they could provide some more information about the reproductive units. So again, I can provide them with a comment here. I can say, you can go down to information about the criteria, the assessment parameter, type in your query and click on the go button, and those comments are then listed. So then if I go back to the site and sign out and sign back in, I can see here that I've got some notifications. So there's a couple of comments that have been left. I left a comment 8 days ago, and so there is some feedback here that I need to attend to. So if I select on my site here, I'll be able to see some specifics, and I can see the RFP has provided me with details, and that's fine. I can provide some. So one thing I didn't do was, so I can view the comments here, but the RFP, I'll just go to that, needs to actually, sorry to confuse you guys here. So the RFP actually needs to make a decision. So they can review, they can provide the comments, they can approve the assessment, in which case the proposer will then have the option to nominate the site for the assessment, or I can return feedback because they need to do some more work on it. So here I need to return the feedback. So I'm returning my feedback. So when I go back as the proposer again, I'll see that my site is back in draft state, and I can go into edit mode. I can view the comments and I can address them. So I know that I need to do something, say something about my boundary. So I can go back into site details. I can go down to the boundary. I can provide some more information about the delineation here, and I can propose the assessment. So that kind of communication can happen between the proposer and the RFP, and equally the KBA Secretariat once the assessment is nominated, the KBA Secretariat can then take part and provide some feedback, and there can be a bit more back and forth until the whole system is complete. So that is the process for how the whole proposal and review process works. Just to say then, in terms of some of the future developments that we're hoping for the site, I mentioned that we will have more detail on the homepage here, some welcome and text sort of showing you how to get started, and some information, some supporting information. We are developing a report, an import section. So if you have hundreds or tens or hundreds of sites, then rather than having to go through this system one by one, you can compile a bunch of CSVs, and we'll be able to get those CSVs sucked into the system. Appreciate that many of you guys are working on the proposal and nomination forms at the moment. So we're looking to find ways, once we get the CSVs sorted out within the system, we'll look for ways of getting the information from the proposal and nomination forms onto the CSVs. So that helps the whole process. We are looking at integrating the spatial information. So as well as seeing tabular information about sites, you'll also be able to see a map and be able to interact with the system through the map. We're looking at developing an area for the management of legacy sites, because if any sites are identified by criteria identified prior to the standard, so in this case it's mostly the IBAs, the KBA Secretariat needs to know if the assessments meet IBA criteria also. So in BirdLife, we're looking at developing some additions there that will help with that process. And also we will add KBA monitoring fields in a KBA monitoring section in due course, along with a monitoring dashboard that will provide metrics relating to the sites that will help folks that are doing their monitoring assessments. And then the only other thing that I want to say is that we have a full stack developer beginning in BirdLife in the next few weeks. And once he gets his feet under the table, he will then be able to take some of this stuff forward and improve the flow of it. So we recognize that there's still some things that are a little bit clunky from a user perspective. Some of the things like, if I go back here and I'm interested in a site in Turkmenistan again, I have to scroll down here, or I have to use this scroll menu here. It'd be much handier if you could just type it in. It'd be very handy to have a search bar. We will be translating this into a couple of other languages, certainly French and Spanish to start with. And yeah, I think that's mostly what I wanted to cover. So I might hand it over to you guys for any questions.
Just quickly before you do that, can you just show people how to nominate a site?
Yeah. So where do I get to? I guess.
So this would be once the RFP has reviewed the site, you've had feedback, and then both you and the RFP are happy with it, then you would go on to nominate it.
Yeah, exactly. So this one here, site. It's not that hasn't been reviewed yet. Okay, so I'm just going to pull edit. Okay, so I'm just going to close this. Close. And get out of this. So the RFP, once they're happy with the feedback that the proposers provided, will click approve assessment. And are you sure you have to approve? Yes. And then when I log in again, so this is reviewed, and I can review the feedback. If there's any further feedback here, I can look at the comments, and once I'm happy as a proposer, then I can click nominate. And then as the KBA Secretariat, then that'll be over to you, Andy.
Okay, thanks very much, Olivia. Are there any questions from people? Simi's got a hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivia. This is really great to see that we can now propose the KBAs in real time. Both the proposers, the reviewer, and the KBA secretariat can see what is going on. I just went to the landing page on the proposer, and under the action, I see that this is very prone to edit by anyone, including people who are not like involved in the assessment. They can easily edit the information, the data, and this can be very dangerous if important information is deleted from the system. How do we ensure the integrity of the assessment? How do we ensure that the integrity of the assessment is maintained? I mean, I have two experiences, especially from the IUC and Red List of Threatened Species. Most of those assessments will be seen as a PDF, or if we are moving on to an online system like this, the Red List also has what you call the Species Information Service, where we use it to write the assessment for a particular species, and only those who have editing right to a particular what we call working sets, like a folder with species in it, have the ability to be able to edit any information. And once you edit that information, it is sort of tracked to your name. But in this system, it seems like anyone can edit the information, which is, I think, not very ideal. How do we try to alleviate this?
So yeah, you're right. So anybody can actually log in and can open up a new assessment for a particular site, and they can change the details, but it's not until the assessment needs to be fully reviewed through the process until before it actually is confirmed. So it would be captured at the RFP stage. So if you had somebody that was messing about, and it wouldn't be approved, so it wouldn't get past the RFP. Does that answer your question? So I can select any site here, and I can select assess biodiversity, but it's not going to get very far until I go through the system of proposing it and having it go through the full review process before those details are actually accepted in the system.
Okay, Andrew Scow now has a question.
Hi everyone, and thanks Olivia, very clear presentation. I've got just a couple of questions, and apologies, Lisa from Staden, who would know a lot more about this than me, is on leave at the moment, so I'm going to do my best. But so the one thing I was just wondering was, when you mentioned that the NCG members should make a note that do you mean like the Secretariat and the Chair should just go register as the NCG, or do you mean all the members of that national NCG should register as the NCG? That was just one little question. And then, yeah, I'm wondering about, I see in the chat there's something about the CSV option, but I didn't quite get anything around bulk uploads and whether any functionality would be done for that, so that people, I mean, we're a bit of a funny case. I mean, we're going to have like 200 plus, so we're going to have to make some special plan. But I'm just wondering whether more generally you've got an idea for people who've got, 10 sites, whether they would be able to upload in a sort of more of a database way. And then I was just wondering, does your system save as you go? Because I would imagine it'd take quite a long time to fill in something. And what would happen if your internet bombed? Would you have to start again, or is it kind of saved? And that's all I can remember right now. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll answer the last one first, because that's the easiest. Yes, everything is auto-saved, but in some cases you can go back. So if you reassess, actually you go through a reassessment situation, but if you go through a reassessment situation and you can start the reassessment, you can actually cancel it and go back. So there are a couple of areas where you can actually cancel. So yes, auto-save is the option. The NCG, yes, if you're an NCG and there are 10 of you, you should register as an NCG, or you could be an individual in the system. You can go into your profile area and you can change yourself to NCG, but that has to be approved before it can actually be enabled. And then the
question there was, should everyone register on the NCG? Or can you have one person who represents the NCG and does all the data entry?
Well, you can, however it works, you can have 10 different people registering as the NCG, or you can have one person. If you have one person doing all the data, then it probably makes most sense for that person to register as the NCG, and invite the others as co-proposers. Yeah, so it just depends on how it works. I think in many cases there are lots of different members of the NCG participating in the data process, aren't there?
There can be, yes. So I guess it's up to the NCG to decide how they best want to do it.
Yeah, It may make sense for all members to register as an NCG, because then they have access to the information at their fingertips then.
There's one in the chat which says, what about what's happening with sensitive species? Will anyone be able to see those species and sites on this database if they log into it?
So at the moment, so that's another thing that we're developing. So thanks to whoever raised that. Yes, at the moment, we don't have anything for dealing with that. We are planning that if you identify a species, if you select a species for a species assessment and the species is sensitive through the IUCN Red List, that it will be flagged at that point. You will also have another option further down in the site section of identifying if your site, so it may not be sensitive at a global level, but it might be in a regional level, and you might want to flag it as sensitive. So you'll have a second option of doing so there. We don't have any mechanisms at the moment within the system for managing them, so we haven't integrated that as yet. But that's certainly something that's on our list to do quite soon. Just the last question that Andrew had was about uploads. And the idea with uploads is that you would get the site IDs from the system and you would populate those in the CSVs. So there'll be about 5 or 6 different CSVs. One will relate to sites, one will relate to species assessments, one will relate to ecosystems assessments, for example. You would use the site ID and you would provide your information about your species or your ecosystems, and that would be for multiple sites, and then you would be able to upload that within the system, and it would be in CSV format.
So if they're proposing new sites, would we issue those numbers?
So if you're proposing, yeah, if you propose a new site, you need to go into the system here and create the new site. So it doesn't take a huge amount. You don't have to provide a huge amount of information. You can click propose site and that creates a new site ID. You don't need to provide any more than that. You can provide the rest through the CSVs, but you would need to do that first step through this system.
And just on that sensitive species issue, Andy, could you guys just talk a bit more about that? Because that's obviously something that's really important. We've seen huge like poaching issues with succulent plants and so on, and we wouldn't want, I mean, I know it's not directly giving, people won't have access to the species locality directly, but if a KBA is really small, perhaps it could hint. So we already obscure, we have got an extra field like called shared, share name, where we've got like an obscured like sensitive species #1. And yeah, it was just a thought around how operationally you would deal with that, but obviously we can sort that out later. But it's something pretty important for some of our smaller KBAs.
Yeah, it's something we've given quite a bit of thought, and it's been in various discussions, TWG, SAC, and there's lots of folks talking about it. I think what we'll be doing here is, once we have options for managing them, so we will withhold the information on sensitive species. So at the moment, you can see it's fairly open system. We need to find a way of closing in on some of these species that are sensitive and making sure that sensitive species are not exposed to anybody visiting the site. It's been agreed that it'll only be the RFPs and the KBA Secretariat and the NCGs who will get to see information relating to sensitive species at sites. And whenever that process is sorted out within the system, it'll be properly branded. So if anybody's uncomfortable doing it, then maybe they can contact the KBA Secretariat and we can sort of look at finding ways of dealing with it. It does get more complex when you've got one trigger species that's sensitive for that site. Then all of a sudden we're in a situation where we have to withhold information about the site, and that obviously gets a little bit more complex. But yeah, just to say, it is, we have put thought into it, and we just need to try and get it to try and build it within the system.
Okay, all right, perfect.
There's another question in the chat from Joshua Sessi. is there an offline form that can be used and then uploaded at once? So that's when we're talking about the bulk upload forms, that's what's being developed at the moment. At the moment, some people have been using the Excel file that you can download from the KBA website. And if you use that and have proposals already in that system, we have a script that will be able to read them in and push them into this system. But ultimately, we want people moving across to using this system because it makes the review process a lot quicker.
Share the contact with me, but I think it would be.
Are there any other questions? No, if not, I'd like to thank Olivia very much for walking us through this. I'm sure once you start playing around with it, you'll have more questions. I have put in the chat the link to the training, the test portal. So if you do want to play around with it, do it on that site. Don't do it on the actual KBA website portal. But remember that if you're doing it on that, none of it will get into the database. So don't do your real sites there. Just do it to get a bit of use to how to use the system. Oh, hang on, there's a load of other things. Thanks from everyone. Okay, thank you everyone for attending. And as I said, we're recording this and we'll put it up on the YouTube channel that we use for the KBA community. Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye.
Everyone, cheers.